Hello out there, and a viewer commented about this knife on the review that I did, the Kershaw Highball here, and requested a disassembly video. And you know, I posted the video about this knife a while back now. Really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite Kershaws of the year, one of my favorite knives of the year period so far. But yeah, why not? Let's disassemble it. Let's see what's on the inside. Let's see how this baby is functioning. One thing that I really liked about the knife is just how sweet the action is without thumb studs and without a flipper. So you saw I was just able to spider flick that. Really easy to pinch open, and even though the detent isn't that strong, it's not shaking out. The other example that I had was Big Red's, and his detent was a lot stronger, so maybe a little bit of inconsistency there, but let's just get going and take a look. So really like the pivot and the blue accents. Those little things, I don't know, man. Those little things can really go a long way when you just have, you know, a little bit extra. And it's not even necessarily something that, for me, matters in terms of having a knife that looks prettier. But I just think it's nice when, especially on budget knives that so often look alike, it's really nice when a company will do something like that to make them different from each other, you know, just to give it a little bit more of a unique character. So you might have just heard that. Just unscrewing the body screws just popped everything. So when I'm disassembling knives, I just usually go with whatever's easiest. I don't necessarily always have like a set order of how things are going to go, you know. So started with the pivot. The other side of the pivot didn't easily just slide right out, so I just went a different direction. So there we go. Screw's falling out. We've got plenty of space here though, so nothing's going to get lost. So here's that other body screw. Very good. All right, so let's take a look at the knife in this position before we actually go all the way with it. All right, you can see a little bit of dirtiness here in the bearings. But, I mean, that's just from carrying and using it. What I always think is pretty interesting is that some knives will have just these captured bearings. Some knives will have like looks like a steel washer in there with it as well. I don't really know the rhyme or reason that leads to one knife having certain things and the other not. So go figure. All right, so that's everything. No need to pop this off on this side, and also no need to, well, I did sort of, but this is a little piece that's actually not screwed in. It just holds the backspacer in. And then up here we have our stop pin. And that's it. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward kind of thing. The viewer was asking about the detent, I believe. So let's try to take a look at this. And I might insert pictures or just zoom in a different inset shot. You can see that's just like sludge. But there's our detent ball. Pretty nice sized detent ball. And then the detent hole. So it's pretty nicely done and pretty nicely finished. And what you can see sometimes is even if a knife is super smooth, you know, if the finishing job right here, or the coating or whatever, isn't really nice and even, then you'll get this like grittiness. And it happens when you acid etch actually, and don't really take care of this track. You know, you can see the track that the actual detent ball moves on. You know, if somehow any kind of etchant or anything gets on there, or if the finishing isn't great and you have parts of the knife that are rubbing here, like that will, it won't make it less smooth, but it'll make the sound less crisp, let's say. Well, and it can make it less smooth, to be honest, but that's it. So here's the knife disassembled. If I didn't already say this, I'll link to the Highball video just so frame of reference. All right, now we're gonna get it cleaned up and I will get it back together. And this wasn't really a dirty knife, you know, just a little bit of buildup and dirt in there from basic carry kind of stuff. So nothing major. I generally use stuff like this, alcohol prep pads. I don't know, keeps it from rusting for the most part, sanitizes it, that sort of thing. And yeah, relatively easy to get stuff clean, at least for the minor stuff. I'll use that. One thing to note on this knife, and this is one of the things that I like the most about it, is that Kershaw here has managed to do something that appeases a lot of people as far as their like budget knife kind of requirements, without really taking it out of the realm of the budget knife. They've proven that they can do it. You know, the complaints that people have about the steel being 8CR, like this is D2, so we have that. We also have a number of little details that just make the knife more user-friendly, just in terms of the extra machining on the stainless steel frame. So I'm all cool with the stainless steel frame, and when you do this much weight relief on it, I mean, that's really nice. And then one last thing that really makes a big difference is, especially if you're disassembling a knife, is just the shape of the pivot. And I'm sure there's an expert terminology for this kind of shape, but it's like a C shape with a flat side. And so basically this end of the pivot can't rotate with the end that you're unscrewing. So if you've ever had a knife or a body, like a body screw or a pivot or something, where you go to unscrew it and then the opposite side turns in tandem with it, that can be super frustrating, really hard to break, especially if there's Loctite involved. It's just a pain in the ass. And a simple design like this will keep that from happening, because this part of the pivot just will not rotate when you try to unscrew it. So, you know, little things like that make the knife a whole lot more easy and friendly. And now let's try to get this thing back together on camera, which is definitely not my forte, but we're going to give it a shot. All right, so putting the washer in, and one thing to note about the washers, any kind of bearings, what I've noticed is that sometimes you put them in forward, sometimes you put them in backwards. You know, sometimes this side faces the blade, sometimes the other side does. There doesn't really seem to be rhyme or reason with that on most models, so I'm not sure if that really matters. So generally, when I take a knife apart, and this is good advice for everyone, I take pictures. In this case, I had a video, so I can always go back and check and make sure, you know, how a knife is actually supposed to look. And that's interesting. I hadn't noticed that, but there's a dimple right here that really doesn't do anything. I mean, I suppose you could call it weight relief. Oh, forget it. There's a little piece inside the backspacer that goes into that dimple. All right. So a couple parts that aren't screws that are actually helping with the structure here. Now, sometimes I would put lubrication on this right now. It's really not that big of a deal. I'll do it at the end when I have it put back together, and I'll just do it through the inside. You know, I'm not doing anything crazy here. I'm not too worried about it being perfect. I mean, I'm sure there are people who would say that it needs to be lubricated from the inside and that it's more effective, but for my purposes, not really a major thing. If you're wondering about the tools that I'm using, this is a Kershaw Torx driver that comes with a bunch of different size bits. I use this for like the T8s, just because it works. And then I have a Weeha set that I put into this, like, what is this, Black and Deck? I don't even know what brand this thing is. This is a Weeha bit that I put in here. So that's what I use for the T6s. I do have a T8 that I could swap it out with, but at least this way I always have the T8 ready with the Kershaw thing. So, all right, so let's finish. All right, so that's tight, and now we can flip and tighten these screws. I'm sure this is very exciting. But another really nice thing about this knife is just the simplicity of the build. 2 screws besides the pivot. That's awesome. And the screws work. That's awesome. So, all right, well, that's nice and tight now. There we go. Good. Solid. And that's no lubrication. And that's one of the reasons to do it, you know, without lubricating it. Really get an understanding. I mean, in the lockup, maybe a little bit of wiggle still, but I mean, you know, it doesn't take much. And sometimes when these things are dialed in and they're built well, I mean, you're gonna be in really good shape. So lubrication will only take it to the next level. All right, guys, that's it. That's the Kershaw Highball, disassembled and reassembled. All right, first time I've done one of these videos in a long time. I'm sweating. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. Again, a link to the review of this knife down below as well. Thanks very much for watching, and take care. Have a good one.